Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Xiaomi Mi Notebook Pro. This is a 15.6-inch all-aluminum 4.4-pound chassis. The base model from GearBest cost me around $800 at the time of purchase. This particular model comes with the NVIDIA MX150 with 2 GB of DDR5 VRAM. You also have the Intel CPU, the i5-8250U. That's a 4-core, 8-thread chip. And you also get 8 GB of DDR4 dual channel solution there at 2400 megahertz. The Intel Wi-Fi network interface card is the 8265. Now, all of those things I just mentioned, unfortunately, are soldered onto the motherboard. That does help keep this laptop very thin at just a little bit over 11 millimeters. What's not soldered, however, is the storage and the battery. You have storage of both M.2 and another M.2. Both feature NVMe. One will do 4 lanes, the other will do 2 lanes, provided you are on BIOS 300 or newer. Anyone purchasing this laptop now will get BIOS 502 or newer, so you're safe there. More on that shortly. The storage that came on this was a 256 gigabyte NVMe drive from Samsung. Read-writes were 2800 and 1200 respectively. The battery inside is 60 watt-hours, and I was able to get 4 to 7 hours of battery time, no problem. I was able to stretch it to 10 hours twice, babying it. So hear me out here. When you unplug this, if you keep the brightness at full and run performance, where this thing is just hauling butt, this thing will cruise right along at nearly maximum performance unplugged. At that point, I was only able to get 4 hours of battery life. That was not gaming, but that was doing quite a bit of video editing and various other things, such as Skype, things like that. If you were to take performance and dial that down to minimum, set the brightness to around 25%, getting 7 hours of battery life out of this thing was an absolute breeze. So your mileage may vary. Battery life out of this thing is no slouch. Many others have covered the exact same thing. So with that said, you are able to order this from GearBest.com, and that's pretty much the main place you're going to go to get it. This one shipped out of the Hong Kong warehouse, and I was notified that it would take about 14 days before I would receive it. It took about 10, maybe about 1 week to get to California, and then 3 or 4 days to get to the Cincinnati area. When you receive your laptop, you are faced with 2 options. You are going to get Windows 10 Home, but it's going to be in Chinese. If you proceed with the Chinese installation, then you should be able to find tutorials online to help guide you through this. What you're going to do is install the English language pack, and that's fine. A little challenging, but it can be done. What's also nice, however, is that this comes with the 2016 Microsoft Office suite. And it's the full suite too, so if you do decide to go that route, you will be able to claim that and use it. However, I wanted to see if I could install a fresh ISO out of the gate upon initial boot up and see if that Windows 10 key will then activate once it hits the servers. And wouldn't you know it, it did. However, with that said, this would be a nice segue to talk about our sponsor in today's video. This video is sponsored by SCD Key. SCD Key is an official platform to sell Microsoft keys such as Windows and Office, game keys from Steam, Origin, and Uplay. There's also PSN and Xbox prepaid cards, of course deals on Xbox 3 and 12 month, Google Play. Use the BO game for the exclusive 3% discount, and my favorite part, the Windows 10 Pro OEM key. Featured right now for $14 and the exclusive Bob of All Trades 10% discount code BOAT. This is an awesome deal. I have been using SCD Key in all of my recent builds, including the local police department. Those keys have been going strong, 13 months in, without a hitch. So if you're in a pinch and you need a key, I highly recommend SCD Key. Moving forward, the aesthetics of this laptop, my personal preference, completely ideal. There's no logos or labels on the outside of this all-aluminum chassis that identify what it is. It is about as plain as you can get, and I absolutely enjoy that. You have an HDMI 1.4, 2 USB 3.1s, and a combination headphone microphone jack. 2 USB-C ports. This does not feature Thunderbolt 3. The top port is for charging. Charging is done with the 65-watt brick shown right here. And you can also connect a 4K display to this, but you will only get 30 hertz out of it. After that, you have a full-size card reader. Opening up the laptop, of course, can be done with one finger. Pretty much screams MacBook Pro right off the bat. And that was Xiaomi's goal. They were not pulling any punches on this. This was their goal, was to basically make a MacBook Pro clone running Windows for about a third the cost. And they pretty much did that and succeeded pretty well. Is the build quality up to the MacBook Pro level? If a MacBook Pro is a 10 out of 10, this is probably a 9.25 out of 10. It's fantastic build quality. Fingerprint sensor is on the trackpad, and it works just as it should. It's very, very quick. The trackpad uses Windows Precision. The trackpad itself is large. Button symmetry is good down at the bottom. The top part does not really click at all. I have no complaints on the trackpad, and I have no complaints on the Windows Hello whatsoever. The keyboard spacing is great. At least we get the page up and down keys, which I also like. There's no numbers pad, which is something that I frequently use, but I think a lot of people, generally speaking, would benefit and prefer the way this is set up. The whole deck layout, trackpad, and keys, the way they feel, to me, feels just like our MacBook Air. And I actually like the trackpad and keyboard on that very much, and this feels nearly identical to me. The Full HD screen is glossy. It uses Gorilla Glass. It is not a touch screen. The panel inside is pretty darn nice. If I'm going to be honest with you, I'll put the part number here, and we're coming in at around, let's say, 95% standard RGB, 71% NTSC, and I believe 73% Adobe RGB. So content creators out there, you could probably get by with something like this. If you desire something better, then ultimately you'll just have to look elsewhere. So what about performance and acoustics, all those things that we all love to learn about? Well, the MX150 is interesting because the NVIDIA spec on that is supposed to throttle at around 94 degrees Celsius. And Xiaomi has decided to bring that down to 85 degrees Celsius. But here's the kicker. You will never get this thing to get that hot. I have 150 megahertz core overclock on this and 1000 megahertz memory overclock on this. Not only that, but we took the 8250U CPU from a 15 watt TDP and I unlocked it with a previous BIOS, and now we can push that up to a 45 watt TDP, undervolt it just a little bit, and now run all 8 threads at the 3.4 gigahertz boost all day long with no power or thermal throttling whatsoever. After doing all of those things, the massive heatsink under the hood of this tiny little beast will never get that GPU any hotter than 78 degrees Celsius. That's fantastic. Should you desire to spec out this with the i7 model, you're going to get a 600 megahertz boost. And if you do the BIOS flashback that I have demonstrated in the description below, then you're going to have a hard time keeping temperatures of the CPU from thermal throttling, because after installing that BIOS, I got a maximum temperature now of 94 degrees Celsius. Now that was using this laptop in a manner that's probably not recommended, right? We're talking 2 hours of playing Battlefield 1. That's not what this is for. This is not a gaming laptop, but I was able to cook this thing, never got it to throttle. Oh, and if you repaste it, 88 degrees Celsius on the CPU. Link in the description below for the tutorial on the teardown, repaste, and reassembly. Very simple. Might be worth your time to check it out. So, thermally, when you're trying to max this thing out, you still cannot get it to power or thermal throttle. That is fantastic. But if you desire running this thing bone stock with the BIOS that is going to ship on this thing, which will be a BIOS called 502 or newer, well then you're not going to be able to unlock that TDP. As a matter of fact, you won't be able to undervolt. But it doesn't matter, because the CPU will never breach into the 80 degrees Celsius, and the GPU will never breach the 70 degrees Celsius. That's right, you will have CPU temps, bone stock, in the 70s, and the GPU in the 60s. It runs that cool. What about acoustics? Maximum acoustics was 42 to 43 decibels, and that went with either BIOS. However, the newer BIOS, the 502 or newer, you have a trade-off here. You can either run the older BIOS and have it unlock TDP and really maximize the CPU performance out of this, and if you do so, the idle acoustics and fan noise will pretty much be apparent almost all of the time, especially when it's plugged in. It's not loud, but you will hear it. If you decide to run BIOS 502 or newer, the idle acoustics seem to be a little bit quieter, which could be a nice quality of life for you. I do have a tutorial on how to flash the BIOS forward or backwards, and this will allow you to experiment yourself to see which BIOS suits you. Should you decide to crave the more performance, you'll be able to do so. If you want a quieter laptop, you will also be able to do so. So what about gaming? How does this thing actually handle gaming? It's just an MX150. This is where you need to learn to stay in your lane, right? So if you are playing things such as Battlefield 1, 1080p, 100% scaling, you're gonna have to put your settings to low, and you'll probably average online of around 50 FPS. Not bad. This is not a gaming laptop first, but nonetheless, the performance there isn't too bad. And I was able to do this with the CPU on the newer BIOS, okay? You don't have to do the TDP unlock to get that kind of performance. All right, guys, as you can see, we have field of view at 90 degrees. Motion blur is off. Resolution is 1080p. All settings are to low with 100% scaling. Notice the CPU frequency. And notice how I got burned by the flamethrower. What about Fortnite? Generally speaking, right around 50 FPS as well. At 1080p, 100% scaling, and you're gonna have to mess around with some settings. Some low, some medium. You might be able to pull a high one here and there, but you can toy around with it. Again, stay in your lane. Fortnite, scaling at 100%. We are at 1080p, and we've got some medium, off, and low settings. Does it look bad? I don't think so. Very colorful. Frame rate's decent. Not too bad. You get in the city, it gets a little bit worse, but nonetheless, you should very unlikely see frame rates dip below 50 with these settings. And this panel makes it look so nice. The same thing can be done on Overwatch. You can get some pretty nice settings out of that, and I was able to run well into the 80 and even 100 FPS range sometimes. This is again at full HD at 100% scaling. 1080p 60. We got some settings on high, low, high. Nice little mix. 100% scaling. Not bad. Stay above 60 FPS most of the time. You play this all day. I'm not trying to run ultra on every single game. You really are not going to be able to do that on some of your AAA games anyway. But if you pay a little respect to some of the settings in there, you can still get great frame rates out of this system. So the CPU performance now, when it's unlocked, it does give you a pretty nice Cinebench score boost. We're talking from the mid to upper 500 stock to lower 700s after the overclock and BIOS flashback. Is that worth it to you? Is the trade-off worth it to you? Well, only you can tell from your own testing. For me, yes, it's worth it because I like to be able to extract that level of performance out of this device. I think it's really awesome that we can do that. What about the audio? The Infinity speakers from Harman are some of the best sounding speakers out of a laptop of this form factor on the market, at least that I have heard so far. And I think you wouldn't have to look too far to find others that would definitely be agreeing with that statement. You get great decibels out of it, excellent clarity, it has a nice full sound. The audio is probably going to impress you, and it has no problem overpowering the fan acoustics of this. Being it only at 42 to 43 decibels with the fan, the audio will overcome that effortlessly. And playing music, things like that, it will impress you. It does sound as good as a lot of MacBook Pros that I've heard out there. Very impressed with that. So closing thoughts on this laptop is that what I like about it is it does everything really good, and it makes it easy for me to recommend a machine like this, because I could say, here mom, there's a great laptop for you, it'll just work, it's not going to have any weird things that you have to worry about undervolting, you don't have to worry about taming this or adjusting that, just out of the box, it's a great experience. And that is what I really would want out of a laptop, so I can make these recommendations to people. But with that said, keep in mind that you will have the Chinese Windows installation on there. So there's the first fork in the road that you have to deal with. But more importantly, and this one should never be overlooked, what about the warranty? It's my understanding that trying to get Xiaomi to warranty their products when you are a United States resident is very challenging to do. And I would almost just state, forget about it. If you're buying this laptop, don't expect it to be covered under warranty. And that's a tough pill to swallow. I get it. And if you were to tuck tail and run because of that, I completely understand. I'm not going to conversate with you down below and state, well, you should buy this anyway, and don't worry about the warranty because it's not going to break down on you. I don't know that for sure. Time will tell. I'll let you guys know in 3 and 6 months down the road, or if this thing breaks down, then I'll definitely let you know. But with all that said, I think this is a fantastic laptop for the money. And if you're willing and understanding that your warranty is probably going to be void, and you have no problem putting the English or whatever language you speak pack over the Chinese solution, this is a really good laptop that offers across the board all of the high quality things that you would get out of a much higher end machine for a fraction of the cost. All right, folks, that's going to do it for now. I hope you enjoyed today's video, and I'm Bob of All Trades. Peace out.